We're going to start with introductions. Senator Kenley's taking personal moments, so we'll be right back. And so I am Tim Brown, State Representative, District 41, Crawfordsville, Indiana, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Chairman of the Budget Committee for this year. We'll start, and I'm going to pick on Jim. We'll go around the horn and everybody introduce themselves, please.
I am Jim Landers. I'm with the Legislative Services Agency.
Eric Gonzalez, House Democrat, Fiscal Analyst.
Terry Gooden, State Representative, District 66, covers parts of Scott County, Clark County, and Jefferson County, and from Austin.
Susan Preble, Fiscal Analyst for the Senate Democrat Caucus.
Karen Talian, State Senate and Democrat on the State Budget Committee. Thank you.
David Reynolds, Fiscal Analyst for the Senate Republican Caucus.
And we'll allow Senator Kenley from Noblesville will be sitting next to me. Tim Brown.
Ben Tooley, Fiscal Analyst with the House Republican Caucus.
Brian Bailey, State Budget Director.
Bob Cherry, State Representative from Hancock County, and I have parts of Madison County in my district, District 53.
Alicia Nafziger, Fiscal Analyst for the House Republican Caucus.
Hi, Krista Rivera, Fiscal Analyst for the Senate Republican Caucus.
Ryan Mishler, State Senate District 9. That would be Elkhart, Kosciuszko, Marshall, and St. Joe counties.
Zach Jackson, Deputy Budget Director.
And
Deanna Owari, Deputy Budget Director with the State Budget Agency.
And Senator Broden.
John Broden, South Bend, State Senate.
Thank you, everyone. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Provost Rebel to the microphone for some opening welcoming comments. Thank you for having us here, and thank you for delivering the wonderful weather.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we are delighted to have you here. And if I could take responsibility for the weather, there are many other things I would do. We thank you for joining us for homecoming. We are welcoming, of course, our alums back to campus right now. And I appreciate your taking the time to tour the campus yesterday and have a sense of all the good work that you have helped us do on this campus over the last several years. We've been particularly lucky to be able to renovate many of our facilities in partnership with the state, and that has allowed us to do quite a bit that is important for us as we renew our academic programs. I wanted to just tell you a few things about the campus as you begin your hearing by way of welcome. We welcomed this year a very strong, very academically strong and diverse Hoosier class. There were representatives in our class of all 92 Indiana counties. We had the highest SAT and GPA entering class credentials that we have ever had in the history of our university. We welcomed a slightly larger class and a very strongly Hoosier class. As usual, we've maintained a high representation of Hoosier students. I also wanted to tell you that it was a very strongly diverse class. We increased the diversity of the class to the highest rate we have ever had it in Bloomington. 17% of our beginner domestic students were members of underrepresented minorities. So we have maintained that strong commitment both to excellence and to Indiana in our class. We've also maintained a really deep commitment to affordability. We remain one of the most affordable of the major Big Ten universities. We're the lowest of all 13 Big Ten public universities in average net cost of attendance. We provide a very high level of scholarship and grant aid. In fact, the next meeting I'm going to directly from here is to the IU Foundation, where the presentation I'm doing is on reducing the remaining gap for students who have need between the net cost of attendance and what they have to pay. And we've been nationally recognized for our financial literacy program, which has led to a 16% decrease in student borrowing over the past 3 years, for a total savings to students of approximately $82.5 million in foregone loan debt. So Money Smart's recognized us as a model of excellence in the way we're dealing with student financial literacy and loan debt. We have worked very hard to take the resources that you have provided for us and invest those in ways that that bring returns to the state. Last year was our best year ever for external research funding, with a total of $541 million in external research funding coming to this campus. All of that invested into research and jobs for the state of Indiana. Highest number of patents of any institution in the state last year, 183. And a lot of academic program renewal, all focused on things that will help our students be more competitive in the job force and help the state of Indiana. And I'd point to the fact that we've reorganized on this campus 5 of our schools and created several, one of them most recently in cooperation with our employers like Crane and Cook to develop an intelligent systems engineering program. So we are trying very hard to be the best possible stewards we can with the resources you give us and to serve our state as fully as we can. We hope to be quite responsive, and I think we have been in meeting the goals that the state sets for us, and I hope you have a fabulous time on our beautiful campus and in your time here. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you. I do appreciate your comments and appreciate the hospitality of the IU community. And I guess I just want to say, for former Representative Espik, who used to always question whether the campus was busy at 4 o'clock, we did see that at 5 o'clock, the hubbub of students still going to and from classes. So
we are using our buildings.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Senator Kenley, you want to formally introduce yourself?
Yes, Luke Kenley, State Senator from Noblesville, Senate Appropriations Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Also want to recognize sitting State Representative Dan Leonard, who's in the audience. I think he's going to be coming forward a little bit later, or not, maybe. Dan, they didn't have a shock collar as you entered campus here, did they? Or did they have any Indian ritual that you had to pass before you got on campus? No, thank you. Thank you. The meeting will formally come to order. The minutes of the last meeting have been distributed. Are there any amendments or changes to the minutes as presented?
Move approval.
It's been moved approval. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are adopted. There's a proposed agenda that has been distributed to all members and released to the public. Are there any amendments to the proposed agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is placed on the table for discussion. With the chair's indulgence, we're going to take a few items out of order on the agenda without objection. The Secretary of State has some prior commitments, and going to give Representative Leonard, if he so chooses, the desire to go out of order on the topic. He's here without objection. Is that okay? Hearing none, we will go forward with those people that we call on out of order. First, I'd like to go to a review item number 7, which is an advisory recommendation for the Secretary of State. And I believe Secretary Lawson? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the Budget Committee. I appreciate you taking this agenda item out of order so that I can get back to Indianapolis and get to work. I have here with me a couple of staff members, my Chief of Staff, Brandon Clifton, and the subject matter that I'm going to be speaking to you about is a financial literacy video that I'd like to appear in, and the project person in my office, my Communications Director, Valerie Krager, they're here to help me answer any questions you might have. But I am here today to request your permission to participate in a public television documentary film that my office is creating to educate Hoosiers on how to protect themselves from investment fraud. As a statewide elected official, Indiana Code 42615 requires that I offer a compelling public policy reason to do so and to receive this committee's approval. Accordingly, I am here today to explain the details of the investor education video that my office is making and request your approval to make an appearance. In September, the Investor Protection Trust, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization devoted to investor education and protection, awarded my office approximately $50,000 to create a video designed to educate the state's investors on securities fraud, which is currently a high priority of my office, irrespective of this work. My office is using the grant to work with Indianapolis Public Broadcasting Corporation, WFYI, to produce and distribute a 30-minute documentary film on the subject of investor fraud in Indiana. The video will be used to advance the Secretary of State's investor education and financial literacy programs and to provide viewers with resources for assistance if that program and that its contents causes them to suspect that they've been victims of securities fraud. We found the most compelling way to educate people on securities fraud and to arm them with the knowledge to protect themselves is by telling them real-life stories of other victims of financial fraud. If you think back to the Bernie Madoff case or the case of Marcus Schrenker right here in Indiana, who I'm sure you remember was the guy who lived on Geist, and when we were onto him, he decided to fly a plane to Florida and wreck it and crash it and fake his own death. Well, these stunning stories and heart-wrenching cases of brazen investor fraud motivate investors to take the necessary steps to prevent themselves from becoming the next story that we see on the nightly news. So our video will feature stories that have happened right here in Indiana, and we will feature 3 examples of investment fraud using real cases. Each story will feature the victims and those involved in the case, and I'm here today because I too would like to be involved in telling these stories. I believe that I can play a valuable role as the chief regulator of the securities industry, and as is appropriate, my position allows me to bring a level of authority that cannot be duplicated by a member of my staff. I have overseen the investigations of the cases that we will feature, and I want to be able to tell this portion of the story as well as give tips on how to make sure that this doesn't happen to you. And I believe by taking part in this video that I will enable us to tell a well-rounded story that will captivate our audience. The video will air on PBS stations around the state in the spring of 2016. And my staff and I will also use the video as a tool to educate Hoosiers when we travel. We'll show it to senior citizens, students, and community groups. And we have chosen a broad, timeless stories that will reach a wide demographic so that we can hit all ages, incomes, and knowledge levels. We found it is much more engaging when Hoosiers can hear these stories told by the victims, and it certainly piques the audience's interest when we create this type of dialogue, and we can encourage Hoosiers to not only protect themselves, but to help spread our message to their friends and their family and their loved ones. And with that, I thank you for your time and your consideration today. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Secretary Lawson. Is the PBS, are they writing the script and having final editing and production of it?
I'll have to ask. May I ask Valerie
Sure,
Krager to come up?
Yeah. Hi. We would have the final edit. They are helping us prepare the script, and then we would have the final say.
Okay. Senator Kinley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the beginning, you talked about the source of funds, and I sort of figured out the relevance of that as you continued to talk. So tell me again what the source of funds are.
It's the Investor Protection Trust. We applied for a grant and we received a $50,000 grant
And
from
what
them.
is that?
Can you explain the organization a little better, Valerie?
Yeah. The Investor Protection Trust was established after a large amount of settlements were done with all 50 states, securities settlements. And all of the states put money into this, and then it is used for investor protection outreach efforts. And so after large settlements, our office sometimes puts money in there that we receive from collections.
So there are no state appropriated dollars
No.
being used in any way, shape, or form?
No.
Thank you.
Senator Talion.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I was going to ask also about the money, but once this is finished, who owns it?
We do, don't we? It would be the Secretary of State's office that owns it.
Oh, all right. I didn't quite get that from this. And so does that mean that it can be available to any senior citizen group or anybody who
Certainly.
wants
That's what
to
we plan
get
to use it
this?
for.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it doesn't have, you don't have to license a group to
Oh,
show
no,
it or
no.
something? All right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Any further people, presenters, or anything you want?
I think if we've answered your questions, we're pleased. We
I am
appreciate your
pleased.
consideration.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Then we'll go to item number 2 of review items, the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. We have Bill Noty and Representative Leonard, I believe, and also Jeff Gill. Should have a MOU in your packet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I didn't know I was going to be presenting today, so this is going to be kind of off the cuff, but I'll try and go through this fairly quickly. The Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund had problems going back to about 2000 when we increased benefits and reduced premiums for employers. And in about 2005, the fund actually started paying out more than it was taking in. 2008, we started paying penalty to the federal government for borrowing to build up the trust fund to pay benefits. The federal government charges employers a penalty of $21 each year that we owe the federal government money per employee. So the first year it's $21, the second year it's $42, then $63, $84. In 2015, employers across the state of Indiana paid $105 per employee in federal penalty to the federal government. Next year it will be, in 2016, it will be $126. The proposal is to borrow money from the state of Indiana, transfer it to the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, and pay the federal loan off, which would eliminate the $126 penalty per employee across the state of Indiana. We estimate that that savings will be about $327 million back into the economy in Indiana. That money can be paid back to the state of Indiana at the end of the first quarter. 2015, the fund took in $319 million in revenue at the end of the first quarter. We're proposing to borrow from the state of Indiana about $250 million to pay the federal loan off. Be glad to answer questions. That's kind of a brief outline and a brief highlight of where we are and what we're proposing.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I should say we had a presentation at the last budget committee about some of the mechanics of this, and so hopefully people are well versed.
I believe there's a memorandum of understanding that all the budget committee members have received.
Yes. Senator Kenley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dan, for being here. Thank you for following through and working on this program to help not only our employers, but the possibility for more reinvestment in the state. A couple of clarifying points. Now, I understand that when you borrow the money from the state general fund, that then the intent would be that over time, employers would pay that back through their assessments. Is that correct?
Correct.
So there's no intent to forgive that loan?
That was my intent when we proposed this whole program,
Okay.
yes.
And then the other issue that looms out there for our future, as you know probably better than I do, is that we need to rebuild our unemployment fund to a certain level so that we're, if faced with a catastrophe in the future, that we're prepared for that. And so they will have to continue to pay at rates that will help rebuild the fund. And do you have a feeling on your own part, or do you care to voice an opinion about where you think we ought to be building that fund to, and how fast we can reach that in order to be able to get to this safe condition that we want?
Excellent question. The Federal Department of Labor has a formula for each. It's the same formula, but you apply it to each state, and it is supposed to give you their recommendation for a balance in the fund. That calculates out in Indiana to about $750 million.
Okay.
Personally, I'd like to see it. I think $1 billion is just a nice round number.
Good. So, Mr. Chair, if we do approve this, I would ask that perhaps that it be included in the minutes that the intent is the employers would repay that borrowed amount, and in addition that the appropriate members of the executive branch and the legislature would go to schedules that allow us to try to get some reserve. And we don't need to use the $1 billion number. I just say try to establish a safe reserve in a reasonably prudent time.
Greater than the federal recommended amount, maybe?
That'd be great.
In response to that, Senator Kinley, the Federal Department of Labor allows the loan repayment to be paid out of the trust fund itself. So what the employers would be paying are the SUTA rates, or the state unemployment taxing authority rates, and we could adjust those in session. We are on Schedule E according to statute until 2020, and that could be changed to allow the fund to grow faster or slower depending on what we do.
Yeah, I put that in your good hands, Representative Leonard.
Thank you, Senator Kinley.
Any further questions? Senator Talley.
I just want to make a comment. You know, for several years, I have also taken the position that this loan this loan should be paid off to the feds to avoid exactly what the position that we're in right now. I think this is a great opportunity at a time when the rates are going to rise again, but our balance is just at a point where we can pay this off and get the balance down. The penalties will go away, and we will, be able to put that money back into Indiana's economy. I've been working with Dan on this for a few months now. I really wanted to see this MOU as a memorialization of the intent that this is a loan, and that it should be paid off in the by the middle of the year. So I applaud this. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
To be a little more specific, the unemployment insurance is paid at the end of the first quarter. It's not due back until the end of the following month, so it would probably be in May or early June.
And I just, Senator Talley, want to thank your efforts in this, because I think that also makes it a much more understandable process by having the MOU document before us. So I want to thank you for persisting on that. Any other further questions? Bill, would you want to have any comment before we leave this topic?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and ladies and gentlemen of the Budget Committee. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Representative Leonard for his understanding of the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund and how it operates and so forth, and about this decision on the advancement from the general fund, a short-term loan. I know Chairman Brown, and by the way, I did want to say we are here on behalf of Commissioner Braun, who is in South Bend today at a Workforce Development Board conference or meeting, and he is very much involved in what we are doing here, as well as Josh Richardson, who I know a number of you know very well, and helped us to put together this presentation. I know you had referred, Chairman Brown, that we did do a presentation on kind of the history of the trust fund, how it got to be where it is, and so on and so forth. And with Representative Leonard's description, it seems like you all have a pretty good handle of where we are, and we don't want to go forward with any more information that you feel you need. We passed out the presentation here, and I just wondered, was there anything that you felt, because I know Senator Talion, you were not here at the last meeting, is there anything else that we can provide from a historical standpoint that would help you going forward?
Just a question, do you have any expectation based on the receipts that have come in yearly of, will it take, what, 3 to 4 years to get us to a balance of $700 to $1 billion surplus?
Very good question. If you would turn in our presentation packet, it would be the second chart, where what we have done is, given our conversations with the Office of Management and Budget and Brian Bailey at the State Budget Agency, we have kind of put together a scenario as to if this does happen, what would it look like? And thank you, Jeff. And so on that chart, you can see that down through 2014 are actual numbers, which represent premiums received, the benefits that we pay, the surplus or deficit generated during that year, what the fund balance is, and then when that FUTA penalty that we're all trying to avoid kicks in. And so the goal of the short-term loan from the general fund would be to provide what we feel is the $250 million, would need to be paid off by November 10th. And here, just to give us a week's advance to make sure we've got everything covered, we were hoping to do that at least by November 2nd, so that we'd make sure that we have it at a zero balance. And you can see there where it's zeroed out at the end of 2015, and then in 2016, we have there as asterisk that we would pay the $250 million back to the general fund, and that would be again by May 27th of 16. If you flip the next page, just to make sure, as Representative Leonard was discussing, the majority of our revenues on unemployment insurance premiums come in due to first quarter wages in the second quarter, predominantly by the first part of May, by about May 12th is when we get most of them. So we do feel like we'll have the revenues to be able to pay that back. Now, to your question, Senator Talion, you can see at the end of 16, we project to be somewhere between, this is somewhat conservative, 70 to, I would say, 100 million in what our UI trust fund balance would be at the positive at the end of 16. And then continuing on, we could build that by about 300 million each year. So given this scenario at the end of 18, schedules staying the same as what they are right now, the economy staying somewhat similar, we feel we could be at 650 million by the end of 18. By the end of 19, if everything stays the same, we should be somewhere near, Senator Kenley, somewhere near around $1 billion, we would say. And that's probably a little bit of future discussion as to what that perfect number is, but we're certainly open to talking with you on that. But really what this does, it really somewhat takes 1 year out of the buildup, basically. It probably would have been at 900 billion in 2018 this way. It's at 650. We'll take 1 more year to get up to the billion balance.
Just one final question. We don't have to pass any legislation to get rid of the penalty. It just disappears when the loan is zeroed. Okay.
That is correct. As long as, here's 2 things, and if you wouldn't mind, because I wanted to let you know that if this decision is made, we have really spent a lot of hours looking through how this would all flow through with the help of Zach and Brian and Micah. We've tried to make sure that if this decision is made, that we just kick it into gear and it's a done deal. So as we go through the timeline here, the key dates, Senator Talion, are November 10th there, where we have to make sure that we are at a zero balance in our unemployment insurance trust fund. If that is the case, yes, there's no additional legislation that needs to be passed. What that does at that point, it relieves employers come January of 2016 of writing that check under 940 for the FUTA credit penalty, total combined of $327 million. Then, and this is super key, if we go to January 1st, which is our objective as well, we do what they call resetting the clock on those FUTA credit penalty reductions. And as long as we're at a zero balance at 12:01 a.m. on January 1st, we will have done that. We will have accomplished that. So if there would be a future time when we would borrow from the trust fund again, we would start back at the 0.3%, not at basically 1.8 or 2.1 or whatever it might be.
I just thought maybe that the key date was May 29th.
It is, I don't know, that was not in this timeline when I came down here today, and somehow the committee in their awareness program slipped it in there. So that is definitely the key date to me as well.
Is that because it's my 60th birthday?
Oh, my, yes. I thought it was 50, Chairman Brown, but no?
Yeah, all right,
okay.
Thank you. Flattery gets you everything.
If I could add as well, just wanted to add this, the Commissioner Braun, was very intent. He's a data person, I think, as you all know, and the last page of our presentation here, we had Mike Hicks from Ball State University. Some of you may know him, did a bit of an economic impact study, and there are just some numbers on there as to what he projected should the loan, short-term loan is approved. So you can read through those. If you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them for you. So,
Senator Kenley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Leonard, that page is pretty instructive there, and I would point out to you that in the 3 years of 08, 09, and 10, we paid $3 billion in benefits, and in the year of 09, we paid $1.8 billion. So as we think about what is a fair reserve amount, I think we need to look at those numbers, see how long we can last and with what we do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
As these tables were made, was it on the assumption of what unemployment was in the first quarter? Or do you remember how the data was analyzed? Because the question might be, let's just take January 1 of this year, 15,
right?
And right now, what's the change in unemployment rate in the state of Indiana?
From January 1 of 15 to right now?
Yeah.
Is what we're saying? Let's see. I know we're at, I believe I have I'm not sure if I know exactly what the number is for this. It would be for September. I can't remember if I have the authority to be able to say that at this point. I'm not sure. I know it was 4 point. It was 4.6, I know, last month, and I have to say, I don't know, Jeff, do you remember what it was at the beginning of January? I'm not totally sure what it was on January 1st of 15.
I believe we've dropped at least 0.3 of a
At
point
it
and
was in-
maybe 0.6 of a point,
Yes.
which makes huge difference in these numbers as we move forward.
Right, as far as benefits and being paid is what you're
And
saying.
wage base.
Correct, yeah. And we do know this, that we're down benefits paid over last year of about 15% right now, Chairman Brown. The receipts, however, stay a little bit more constant. They're about 5% less than what they were last year at this time. So definitely both dropping, but the benefits look like they're dropping more than the premiums received, which is a good thing for the strength of the fund.
Any further questions of the committee? Representative Cherry.
Yes, I was wondering, thank you for your presentation and Representative Leonard's as well. But I was just wondering, this is wonderful in the sense that we're getting rid of the penalty and starting to build our base back again. But how are we compared to other states? I know many states had to borrow, and we're in a better position. Hopefully, this will help move us forward faster.
Sure. The history of the borrowing from the federal government obviously does go back to about the 2008-2009 timeframe. There were 32 other states other than us and the Virgin Islands as well that borrowed. We are now down to, there are 4 states, I believe, that are remaining. So a number of the other states have already paid off their trust fund loan. The most recent ones are South Carolina, North Carolina, Missouri, and Kentucky, I believe, was the latest one. And of course, as I look back through the press clippings and what have you, they're all touting the same thing about what the savings will be for business, what an economic driver it will be, and so forth. So from a historical basis, and of course they were all at different levels. California's still on the list right now. They were the #1 state as far as amounts borrowed. But everybody is touting this as a very positive thing for their state from an economic standpoint. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Clinker, you want to introduce yourself?
Mr. Chairman, it was a tough ride down here. I'm Sheila Clinker, District 27, and an alternate on the Budget Committee. And pardon me for being late.
Thank you. This time we'll proceed with agency projects, I guess the way we usually present the agenda. And I have Department of Corrections first. Kevin. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and good morning, members of the committee. The first project for your consideration today is for our Madison campus. At our Madison, Indiana campus, we have predominantly 2 correctional facilities, an adult female correctional facility and a juvenile female correctional facility and a state hospital. All of those are managed by my working group. We then have some ancillary functions in the form of DNR's historic preservation and some others. We all receive our potable water from a state-owned pumping station on the river that traverses a line about 4,000 feet long, 399 feet up a hill, and through an 8-inch line, it provides water to our water tower, providing potable water to the entire campus. As we started our master planning process for this capital budget cycle, the 3 agencies sat down and had some discussion. We did some ultrasonic testing of the line. It's 50 years old. We've had some issues with the line. We each allocated $200,000 in our capital budgeting process for the line replacement, and have fully investigated and fully engineered the project and are ready to start construction in the early spring with your approval.
So the water source is the river, is it?
It sits on the river, sir, but it's deep wells, shallow wells. When I say deep wells, they're about 30 to 60 feet deep. They receive their water through the natural filtration of the aquifer.
Okay. I was going to say river water.
No, sir. No. River filtered through many layers of sand.
Okay.
A very healthy aquifer.
Any questions of Kevin on this project? Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, sir. My commissioners remarked several times that not everyone's appreciation for historic correctional architecture is the same as mine. So before I refer to this next project, I've actually included a handout that shows one of the most remarkable buildings of the Indiana Department of Correction. It's a 12,000 square foot, 1939 WPA building built on the grounds of what was then the Indiana Girls School. We now use it as the Indiana Women's Prison. Obviously, it is not the normal type of architecture you see in one of my prisons. This is a colonial revival building. We initiated the interior renovation of this building 4 years ago, completed all of that with offender labor. There's actually been a couple PBS specials that have aired on our renovation of that structure using the offender labor. The last step in the renovation of this structure to give it another century of life is an exterior masonry restoration. In 1939, the standards they used, they didn't have the advanced chemical compounds that we use now to bind block together. They used a lot of steel. There's been some phrases that I've learned during this the engineering of this project that I had no idea existed in 1939. But the masonry failure on the outside of the building, what you're seeing is the outside facade, a lot of spalling from rust of the metal fasteners that holds the limestone together. This project actually completes the renovation of this structure. The structure is used daily. It's a very vibrant structure. It's used for family reunification, faith-based programs. All kinds of programs occur. This is the campus center for the Indiana Women's Prison. We request a little bit under $800,000 to complete the renovation of this structure. Our plan to bid is in February, taking advantage of seasonal interim school work to take advantage of some real good cost structuring we expect to gain during that period.
Questions? Impressive photos of the damage that's there. Senator Tallien.
Thank you. Can this kind of work also be done by inmate labor?
As a matter of fact, ma'am, it can. And today at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, I have 3 offenders and one very, very adept supervisor on a boom lift doing masonry restoration on D cell house. It's identical labor. We talked about this within my working group yesterday evening. We actually have a female offender at the women's prison that's doing an 80-year sentence for murder that is an experienced restorative brick mason. We have one. What are the odds of that, ma'am? I have no idea. But we used her during the interior renovation, during the renovation we've done to this point, with only one. This is beyond the scope of what we're able to do with that one offender. I think even with the staff that we have there, this was outside of our scope to do it in a timely manner to preserve the outside. But absolutely, all the interior work was done with inside. This is such a unique trade field on this kind of building. This is if this and the sprinkler fitter are the 2 highest paying trades in the state of Indiana. So we do this a lot but at this facility it just was not an option. We investigated that.
Any other questions? Representative Klinker.
Thank you. Do we pay our inmates anything for this small salary for their work?
As it turns out, ma'am, I am the highest paying offender wage job in a prison. We set up a special scale to entice our offenders to come and do masonry work for me. Masonry restoration is the most expensive field in my business. Right. Mm-hmm. So we try and offset that. They work long hours at a hot job, a lot of times a long ways in the air. And I'm paying them $1.50 a day, and they are lined up to get those jobs.
Thank you.
Representative Gooden.
So you're saying you're encouraging people to break the law so they can come work on your buildings?
Sir, only if you can find a bunch of restorative female brick masons with low-end felonies.
Right. So, So, on a serious note, I'm the understanding then that this has been through all the historical,
It has.
all the historical paperwork, everything's been done. and
It has. I actually, until recently, sat on the state's Historic Preservation Review Board. I declined to renew my membership in that committee. And when this restoration is done, I would hope that I can get all of the members of that group out there, and I'd love to take you folks on a tour too.
I'd like to see it as well.
This is a unique building for us.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you. Proceed, Kevin, please.
Not nearly as glamorous as the last building. 18 months, 24 months ago, the management of the radio infrastructure within the Department of Correction was turned over to my working group. My working group is typically brick and mortar. We don't usually do anything other than security-related infrastructure. But the management of our radio systems dovetailed into our planning system really well. So we do a lot of long-term planning, long-term technology-based planning for our prisons. So the radio infrastructure actually segued into that really well. We immediately went and did an evaluation of every one of our facilities and looked at our radio infrastructure and the status of it. The radios inside a prison are the most useful tool, I can tell you from working in a prison for 17 years. There's very little that provides the kind of safety that radio does with the man-down alarms and a number of other stuff the radio network enables. When we went and looked at all of our prisons, we found 7 projects. This is the second of those 7 that I will bring to you over the next 5 years. We programmed them into our master planning to upgrade those radios, and it says because of P25. That was the catalyst that started the review, but that's certainly not the sole reason. The radio infrastructure, this project consists of high voltage modernization to the radio repeater systems, new antennas on top of a tower that are over 20 years old. I don't think you'll find many municipalities that are still operating their local law enforcement on 20-year-old systems. So this is literally for our Branchville Correctional Facility is a top to bottom renovation of our radio communication system, from the antenna on the tower to the remaining handheld radios that have not been upgraded thus far. One particular item of note is once we update all the emergency power, all the infrastructure, all the brick and mortar of the radio communication system, we will turn this tower and this site over to IPSC for the ongoing responsibilities of that through their program.
Questions? Is this just the first phase? I mean, will other facilities have this expense and transition to the radios?
At varying levels depending on the size of their system, the physical condition. We actually went in and microplanned even going to check the continuity of the high voltage cables. This is number 2 of a total of 7 that I think the last project is scheduled for 2017 to come in front of this committee. We triage those based on the needs, and one of the really fiscally responsible elements of this project is, as we decommission the Branchville site, we actually harvest every reusable component of that 20-year-old system, rebuild it, and it becomes a spare for our later sites. So rather than try and fund this all at once, this is what we come up with as a responsible, the least fiscally impacting transition as we can as we redo our entire agency's radio communication system. Number 2 of 7, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we'll go to item number 4, Department of Natural Resources. Mr. Clark. Cam, good to see you.
Good morning, Chairman Brown, members of the committee and staff. Cameron Clark with the Department of Natural Resources. We have 4 items on your agenda today. The first is a request for $200,000 of general fund money to replace water lines at Lincoln State Park. Lincoln State Park was developed in 1932, and we have water lines that are primarily cast iron, 40-plus years old. We're starting to see significant water delivery failures, and we've been patching that long enough. It's time to replace those lines. As they fail, as I'm sure you can imagine, we run the risk of health department or environmental management violations, But more importantly to me is we have water disruption. We have camping revenue that we have to refund. And as our CFO, Mike Smith, probably explained to you the last 2 budget sessions, the flooding we experienced this summer caused a significant drop in revenue, about $750,000. So any potential loss of revenue is something that I try and keep an eye on, and we try and prevent. We can't do anything about Mother Nature, but infrastructure issues like this we can do something about. This project is to replace around 5,700 feet of water line and ancillary infrastructure that would go along with it to affect a number of campsites, camping areas, cabins, as well as the 1,500-seat amphitheater that is within the parks as well.
Any questions for Mr. Clark? You brought it up. How are the parks now doing on attendance as we're into the pretty tree season?
Well, with the exception of the rainy season we had, attendance has been very good. We had to refund a lot of revenue and lost a lot of potential revenue in a certain number of properties, but other than that, the other properties have done quite well this year.
Proceed.
The next item in the agenda is a request for $1.3 million from the general fund for rehab and repair at Brookville Reservoir and Whitewater State Park. Whitewater State Park was developed in 1949, Brookville Reservoir in 1975. A lot of the structures and infrastructure there is aging. This property is our most heavily visited, about close to 1.7 million visitors a year. So we need to invest some money into what we've got going on there to make sure that those visitors get the best experiences they can. Projects marked for rehab or repair or replacement with this money involve comfort stations, sidewalks, piers and docks, 20 family cabins, playgrounds, repair the water tower controls, as well as the primary lift station in the park.
Questions? As you repair a facility like this that's heavily visited, do the daily use rates, are they reevaluated on a yearly basis? So the question is, I guess, will fees go up next year?
Fees will not go up next year. We recently instituted a gate fee increase that went into effect this year.
It would seem, though, if you had refurbished or renovated facilities, you might consider that. Especially, I know this facility gets a lot of Ohio State traffic.
Well, we do have in some locations a sort of a tiered structure, depending on what your license plate says as you enter the gates.
Go ahead and proceed.
Next item on the agenda is electrical repair at a number of our camping areas within 5 properties of the Division of State Parks. Brown County, Summit Lake, Lincoln, Mound State Parks, and Raccoon State Recreation Area would benefit from this project. Earmarked here is about 280 campsites that would receive electrical upgrades. What we have there now is again, an aging system, primarily aluminum lines, experiencing a lot of electrical failures. We've got significant age, obsolescence, heavy use, thankfully, as well as heavy demand. The campers that we see at the parks today are significantly bigger and draw a lot more energy than what we saw 10, 20, 30 years ago. These sites, again, as we experience electrical failures, what results in lost revenue, again, something very near and dear to my heart. But more importantly, on average, these 280 sites generate about $500,000 in revenue a year. Pretty significant, and in some areas it's bad enough that our engineering folks have said that we can't continue to patch, we have to replace, and if we don't do that, some of these sites will have to be shut down until we do so. Again, lost revenue.
Any questions? Thank you. Next.
And finally, request for $1.1 million of general fund money to enable us to reopen the Wyandotte Cave systems we have down at Harrison Crawford State Forest, managed by the Division of State Parks out of Obannon Wood State Park. There's a pair of caves down there, a larger one that is currently closed. It was closed in 2009 in cooperation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, an effort to protect the Indiana bat, which is experiencing a significant amount of decline. It's on the endangered species list, and that is one of its primary hibernacula within the Midwest. The guidelines of Fish and Wildlife Service allow these hibernacula that are closed to be used, visited, if you will, in a brief window during the summertime. We would like to be able to open up this particular cave again to the public. 2009, when it was shut down, we saw a drop in visitation, but probably more importantly, there was a drop in regional tourism in that area. We, in late August, a number of us, of our staff, did get a chance to tour the closed cave. My first time in something like that, pretty remarkable. We'd love the public to be able to experience it again. The money would be used to upgrade the safety and security, structural and electrical consulting and design and then construction, septic repairs, and ADA compliance.
Any questions? Go ahead, Senator Talion.
Thank you. I remember when this was closed, when we talked about this, and wasn't there some problem with the bat, some kind of disease or something that they were going, what's the status of that?
Well, white nose syndrome is what you're referring to. That is still a problem, although what I'm hearing is that its spread is not as rapid as it once was, and I don't know the exact reason. Closing a number of the hibernacula to foot traffic, I think, has probably helped. What one of the big concerns is that this fungus is being brought to these caves by humans on their feet. So part of what we would be putting into place here would be essentially a cleansing station for feet that you walk through that is used at other sites.
Thank you. Learned a new word today, hibernaculum. Thank you. Thank you, Cam. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Next item on the agenda is LaRue Carter. Mr. Babb.
Good morning. Thank you for. I'm here to present for LaRue Carter Memorial Hospital to replacement of their building management system. The current system's 25 years old, operated on a Windows 3.1 machine that just cannot be supported. We brought in IoT, the Indiana Government Center, and we looked at every option possible, and the cheapest solution was to replace these 5 controllers, use a server at Logansport, and licenses that are available from Logansport to reduce the cost. Without this system, we could possibly have to relocate these patients for some reason if we lose heat this winter.
That's not good. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9, Indiana Veterans Home. Mr. Klaus.
Good morning. Actually, my name is Dave Conwell. I'm sitting in for Mr. Klaus, a maintenance foreman at the Veterans Home. I'm here to discuss the Dewey Hall roof replacement. The Indiana Veterans Home requests funding to replace the 9,280 square foot roof at the Dewey Hall. The roof is original to the building. It's a 1971 constructed building. The project calls for the original roof to be replaced with a single ply membrane, 20-year material labor warranty. This project was already approved at a lower dollar amount, but after the project began, the contractor discovered that within the building's decking and insulation, due to the water damage, additional repairs had to increase the total fund that was already previously approved by you folks.
Yes, so that, again, this is a project previously approved, but increased amount because of further work and damage done. Question, Senator Talion.
Thank you. Aren't flat roofs notoriously terrible? I mean, is there, has anybody, and I've not seen the building, don't know anything about it, but I mean, isn't there a way that we can make a non-flat roof?
I agree 100%. One thing about the flat roof, I mean, if you look at the age of the building, 1971 to 2015, that lasted a lot longer than my home roof, which is just a shingle roof, but I understand what you're saying.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Item number 10, Indiana State Police, Captain Jenkins.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to present about the Indiana State Police request for 107 live scan machines. These machines are critical for the state of Indiana for multiple reasons. They provide fingerprints and mugshots to the Indiana Criminal History Repository, which we manage, as well as the AFIS system, which is the fingerprints that we pass on to the FBI. To further discuss this and give you some highlight, it's probably best to quickly discuss the past funding for this. Since 1990s, this has been grant funded through federal grants to the Indiana State Police. 2 years ago, that money started drying up, not just for Indiana, but for the entire nation. So this grant cycle, we got awarded enough to replace 15 machines with the money that we received. So we reached out to the committee to appropriate funding for us to replace all 107 machines this time through.
Question. What's the life of a machine then?
We try to get 4 years out of it, and the reason we say 4 years, due to the complexity of the camera, of the scanner, and then the computer software, that's about the lifespan that we can get out of it before the repairs start costing more than the replacement of the machine. So we do a 1-year warranty and then add a 3-year on top of it, so it doesn't cost more for the agencies or state police.
So since we're doing kind of a large amount all at once, we probably should think about 4 years down the road if we're going to have to look at all of them again, or some sort of cycle of replacement.
I am full agreement with you about a sustainable model for this, as opposed to relying upon grants or requests to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Next, proceed to university projects. Number 1 under university projects, Indiana University. Tom Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and committee staff. Indiana University today proposes to you the next 5 projects solely for Indiana University, and then at the end of your agenda, I'll be back to talk about Evansville. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First project on the agenda is Vermont Street Parking Garage facade repair and replacement on the IUPUI campus. The Vermont Street Parking Garage is one of our largest parking garages in our system. This is the replacement of the wood slats that if you've been on, you've seen in parking garages, and particularly on the IUPUI campus, that over time have been degraded by weather, sun, termites, and carpenter bees, and in need of replacement. And so the cost of this project to replace those with, replacing them back with an aluminum extrusion element $3.4 million source of funds is university parking funds through fees that we charge for parking. And I will note that we are assessing all of our parking garages of that era that have the same thing. So I wouldn't doubt that I'll be back to you within the coming years with a few more of these.
Do you think, and I'm sure you looked at other material other than redwood. I mean, would a nice red plastic that looks like redwood last longer?
Actually, that's what it's going to be an aluminum product. So we're not putting the wood back. So the aluminum product is being done with the hope that it could last forever. Okay.
Further questions? Thank you. Next.
Item number 2 is also in Indianapolis for the IU School of Medicine. This is a revision to a project scope of a project that you had previously approved for Center for Drug Discovery and Research Labs within the School of Medicine. We had originally proposed for this project to be in one of the renovated old Wishart Hospital buildings. When we got into the study of that project in the old Dunlap Hospital burn unit building, the figures came back so high that it became obvious to us that we were better served by looking at other options. And so we bring to you today to revise the scope to same purpose, same research lab renovation, but in buildings across the street. This will end up being a more efficient story because we had on our long-term capital list the renovation of School of Medicine laboratories in several buildings, and so this will take that off that long-term list by using the other appropriation. So this is $25 million appropriated in 2013 to be used for same purpose, just in research labs across the street.
So the building or the part that couldn't or was going to be used that's not going to be used, is it going to be used for another purpose, or
it's a candidate for demolition.
Okay. Any further questions?
And if you've been by the Wishart site, you've noticed that we're demolishing lots of buildings at the moment.
Yes. Thank you. Next.
Item number 3 is a very important project for our regional campuses, and this is phase 2 of that project, funded by the General Assembly in 2015 session, $12.5 million for a variety of special R&R projects on several of our regional campuses. What we've done over the last 2 biennia is cobble those R&R projects for our regional campuses together and make them one appropriation. And we list out for you all of the projects that will be done. The major project this time around is in South Bend at the IU South Bend campus, so the renovation of Northside Hall, and then several others that you will see there. Again, $12.5 million through state funds.
Questions? Thank you. Go ahead. Proceed. Number 4.
Item number 4, and this is a project that's here on the Bloomington campus and one we've highlighted for you. This is phase 2 of the old Crescent renovation program. This will renovate, this is a program that we look to renovate over a series of a number of years, our older academic buildings, some dating back to the turn of the 19th and 20th century. This one will renovate Swain Hall, Kirkwood Hall, and Ernie Pyle Hall here on the Bloomington campus. In fact, Ernie Pyle Hall is right below us over here to the right. And 2 of the Ernie Pyle and Kirkwood are relatively small buildings. Kirkwood is one of our first buildings built on this campus. 2 of the 3 buildings do not have air conditioning and will be part of the renovation. Swain Hall is the biggest one. It is our physics building, and that building will be upgraded in terms of its laboratory space, but a lot of work again into HVAC and infrastructure needs. Happy to answer any. This is $48.5 million fee replaced bonds appropriated in 2015.
Senator Kenley.
So was the physics building built when they were still arguing whether the Earth was flat or round? Is that what you're telling us?
Just about, Senator Kenley. Although that building was built at a time of running water and indoor plumbing.
And how many additions to it?
It's been built in 4 phases. It started in 1910, and the last one was done in 1960. So even the youngest part of that building is 55 years old.
Any for, pardon? No. Any further questions? Thank you. Item number 5.
Item number 5, also here on the Bloomington campus. This is in the Harper Hall and the Foster Quadrangle, a residence hall project to repair the limestone facade of this building. This last winter, during a drastic freeze-thaw cycle, we had a couple of panels come off the building and fall off the building. Fortunately, nobody was hurt or near them when that happened. We immediately cordoned off the building, did a study, and recognized that we need to do repair of those stone panels, because over time, the fasteners of those behind wiggle just a little bit, and it cores out the limestone and makes them looser. And so that this project will be to refasten all the limestone on that building. This is the second time I've been to you with one of these projects over the last few years, and because many of these buildings were of the same generation, and we are studying further ones right now. And again, I wouldn't doubt that I'll be back to you with some others. These are normal R&R projects. This is the definition of R&R, and this one is $3.5 million and funded out of residential housing funds.
How does the residential fees compare to other Big Ten universities for IU?
We are actually, here on the Bloomington campus, among the lowest in the Big Ten. And that has been a focus of our trustees to keep our housing fees and our housing options very accessible and very affordable to students, because we know, and I've said this publicly before, we could build very high-end stuff in residence halls and sell it. But that's not necessarily the right thing to do in terms of affordability. And so our trustees have been very firm about that and keeping those fees manageable.
Any other questions or comments? Actually, on our agenda today, we have item 6 is the IU-USI project. So you can go ahead, and Cindy, if you want to come up with him,
Yes.
we'll make sure that this shows our multi-institutional cooperation.
Let me introduce my good friend and colleague, Cindy Brinker from the University of Southern Indiana. And it has been our pleasure at Indiana University and the School of Medicine to bring to you and to have worked on over the last few years the Evansville, the Multi-Institutional Health and Sciences and Research Center to be built in downtown Evansville. This is a project that is a partnership between the Indiana University School of Medicine, the University of Southern Indiana, and the University of Evansville, as well as the City of Evansville. This project in total will end up being just over $60 million. $55.2 million of that is coming from a combination of state and city resources. The state sources of that are $19.2 million appropriated for Indiana University, $6 million appropriated for the University of Southern Indiana. The University of Evansville will fund their piece through a long-term lease with the developer on the project. The project is approximately 145,000 square feet. It'll include, as you might imagine, classroom space, research labs, instructional research labs for a variety of programs that will range, again, from the School of Medicine to physical therapy programs, nursing programs. This facility has been long sought from the community of Evansville. Folks there are very excited about it. You appropriated funding for the planning of this a couple of years ago, appropriated it for Indiana University to manage the project. It's been our pleasure to do that. We will continue to oversee the delivery of the project. It is through a public-private partnership, a P3, working with a developer, and so they will own the land underneath the building. But the building, the state portion, if you will, for IU and for USI will be in a condominium arrangement where we will take ownership of the building after construction is complete. With that, I'll allow Cindy to comment and then be happy to answer any questions.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Tom.
Cindy.
And I think Tom did a very good job of explaining the project to you. Primarily, the University of Southern Indiana will bring graduate programs to the facility, and then when the dental school, parts of the dental school come to Evansville, our dental assisting program will also, our students will work with that program. Also, the mayor was planning to be here today. He was unable to attend, and I just would like to bring greetings from him and his appreciation for your consideration of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I didn't ask, is anybody from University of Evansville here? Maybe on the private side? No? Okay. Questions for Tom and Cindy? Senator Talion.
Thank you. Can you just, you said something that intrigued me that I had not heard before. So how does the ownership of the building end up?
Because neither institution, or any of the institutions involved in this, owned property in downtown Evansville. The city of Evansville bought the property and then deeded that to the developer. And so they own the land upon which this building will be built. You appropriated cash for this facility in order to carry that out. Therefore, we will, the developer will build the building. We will purchase the improvements for the money that you have appropriated, and then we will own it basically in a condominium deal. So we will be, Indiana University will be the owner of our portion. The University of Southern Indiana will be the owner of their portion. University of Evansville will be leasing it from the developer, so the developer will be for a while, will be the third owner in that leg.
The building, but the building sits on land that's owned by the developer.
Correct. And then we will have an operating agreement between the institutions and the developer that will address operating expenses, heat utilities, custodial, all those things, and R&R long-term as well.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kenley.
So let's keep talking about that. How long is this agreement? In other words, you're going to put a lot of money into a structure there, and they probably paid almost nothing for the land. At some point in time, is this going to revert to that developer?
No, it's good. At some point, it would be our goal to revert back to us.
Pardon?
To revert back to the institutions.
And does the agreement say that up front?
We're negotiating that now in terms of the long-term ownership.
Well, you got the project on the table here today, and we need to give you the go-ahead on that, but hopefully you will take into account our wishes that you fulfill that particular item.
I will.
Okay.
Appreciate that encouragement.
Any further questions? Thank you. Thank you. University of Southern Indiana, item 7, Cindy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and committee staff. USI proposes the construction of a welcome center on our campus. It'll serve as a resource for the many visitors who come to our campus on a yearly basis, including prospective students. The facility will include a reception area as well as several meeting rooms, and it will be the location where campus tours will start on our campus. As part of Campaign USI, which is our ongoing capital campaign, we received private gifts in the amount of $2 million to help us construct this facility, and the balance of the cost of the project would come from special university project funds. We are very excited about the project, and we'll ask your consideration for approval of the project. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Is there a Zach Jackson brick?
You know, we'll make sure there is one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is item 8, Purdue University. Tony? I guess we did all the Purdue projects last meeting, right?
That's right, we did. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Tony Hahn, Purdue University. I bring to you today one project for your consideration. This is the McCutcheon Hall University Residence Bathroom Renovation Phase 5. This is the 5th of 9 planned phases that over 10 years we renovate the University Hall's bathrooms. This work replaces original finishes and infrastructures from 1962 when the bathroom was built, and will replace plumbing, electric, exhaust, and infrastructure. We will also expand the footprint of the shower and bathroom. Right now it services 22 rooms or 44 students, and there are 4 showers. We will take over 1 living room to create 8 showers and update the finishes. It's a tight construction timeline of May of 2016 for planned occupancy of August 2016. There will be a 20% savings in water utilization through better fixtures. And it's an estimated $4.8 million project, with the funds coming from the Housing and Food Service Reserves, which is generated by room and board fees. And this will be the 5th of 9 over 10 years. And what we have found over the previous is that the estimates have come in between, or the projects have come in between 4.1 and 4.3. So very similar projects in the other halls.
Any questions for Tony on item A? Again, I asked Tom, are your housing fees, how do they compare in the Big Ten? Are you lower than IU? No, I'm kidding.
On average, for housing and food, we are not. In fact, but we were the only Big Ten institution to decrease the average fees last year. We rank about 4th in the Big Ten at $10,300 for the average room at the average meal plan, but we're the only to decrease. We've frozen housing for 2 years and decreased food costs by 10%.
Thank you. I noticed that your balance of the HFS fund on September 30th is $31 million, and IU's is only $11 million. Is it because you have more projects in the queue, or?
I think that would be accurate. We, as you can see, we got 50 some years out of these bathrooms, so we have some in the queue.
Further questions? Thank you. That concludes the project list. We now next go to the review items. And first up on the review item, Zach Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I placed a handout on your space prior to the start of the meeting. Here's what you're looking for. I'm joined today by a couple of the staff from Mercer. On the front row here, we have Laura Moser and Pete Eddings. Really the second slide kind of talks about the overview of the project to date. What we've been tasked by Legislative Council on Budget Committee's behalf is putting together a compensation study of the Indiana State Police and comparing that to some other jurisdictions. We hired Mercer, kind of piggybacked on an existing contract that the State Personnel Department has. We've hired Mercer to help out with that study. The original request from Legislative Council was to complete this study by November 1st, but we've kind of had a holdout with Ohio as far as getting complete information. We sought kind of an extension, and Legislative Council indicated no problem with kind of moving that deadline back. We're still hoping for we're still hoping to complete this at the next Budget Committee meeting in December, but a lot of that depends on the cooperation that we get from Ohio between now and then. If you look at slide 3, that shows the police departments that we're including in our study. The Legislative Council challenge said, look at the surrounding states, so we took that literally and are including the 4 surrounding states. We've received everything that we need, almost everything that we need from all these states except Ohio. And then we tried to find, Legislative Council asked us to look at some local police departments as well. So we tried to identify police departments that were geographically different, as well as whether it's northern, southern, central, as well as a mixture of rural, urban, suburban type of police departments, as well as sheriff's departments. Moving on to the 4th slide in the presentation, just wanted to show you kind of how thorough these questions are that we're asking. I won't go through these one by one, but slides 4 and 5 show the questions that we're asking. And I mean, just as an example, within our own state, trying to answer these questions, it wasn't, it wasn't just that Indiana State Police could answer these. It was Indiana State Police, it was the Auditor's Office, it was State Personnel Department. So it's a pretty big task, and we're very thankful for the states that have, states and jurisdictions that have responded back so far, because it wasn't an easy, fill out this 5-minute questionnaire. It's hours worth of work we've asked them for. And then the last two slides, slides 6 and 7, kind of get at the status of where we are with receiving compensation as well as benefits information from all these entities. And you can see we're doing quite well, with the exception again of Ohio. We've had lots of conversations. It's kind of, that they seem pretty willing to help 1 minute, and then we go a couple weeks without hearing anything. And so we're hopeful, but we understand that they're in the middle of union negotiations as well, and that's what they've indicated is preventing them from helping out completely at this time.
Senator Kenley.
Yeah, two thoughts, Zach. Worked with Ohio on the streamlined sales tax program for many years, and they were always halfway in the door and halfway out the door. It sounds like a similar experience. You might have to volunteer to send a staff person over there or something to just work, say you'll provide some sweat equity to get this information, and maybe that'll happen that way.
Understood.
Second thought was, had a retired officer suggest to me that there might be a value to indexing the pay based on where you work, and I think your categories that you have there are great, that you've got them all outlined, and I wasn't too convinced that you could index a wage for different parts of the state and all that, but you might have your little group look to see if they do that
Okay.
anywhere around the country, and whether or not that's feasible. And so we just to give us a little information on that. It might be difficult to fulfill that, but maybe we should know whether that's even a possibility or not.
Understood.
I might, being from a rural area, argue a little bit that it's probably riskier to be in a rural area. If you're state policeman in Marion County, you have the backup of IMPD and other surrounding cities. If you're the state policeman out in Fountain County, you're the only one for 7 counties. And so if you're in a situation of a road stop that goes bad, you have nobody.
Right, good point.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. We've talked about item 2, item number 3, Medicaid state plan amendments. Joe, are you hiding behind the TV screen? Thank you, Joe.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have one item to present to you this morning, a state plan amendment that Indiana Medicaid has submitted to the federal government to update how we pay hospitals for inpatient services. We use a method called the Diagnostic Related Group, or DRG system. Both Medicare and Medicaid programs use this system to pay inpatient hospital services. With the conversion to the ICD-10 code set on October 1st, it was necessary for the state to update our DRG grouper to comply with the new ICD-10 code set. So we are moving to what's called the All-Patient Refined DRG Grouper version 30 from the version we used before, which was the AP DRG system. These DRGs take into consideration resource utilization, so the services that are necessary when patients seek care in hospitals. And this particular grouper also takes into consideration the severity of illness and risk of mortality. So in connection with moving to this new grouper, our goal was to have it be budget neutral. We believe that we essentially have created a mechanism in the rebasing to move to this grouper, which is budget neutral. We did a fiscal analysis of the conversion to this new system and found that there was a very slight increase in Medicaid costs of about $770,000 a year, of which about $260,000 would be state share. So that is the item that I had to bring before you today.
Senator Kinley.
Joe, you've been coming before us now for a number of months with these over the last few years, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate these updates. It sort of gives me a sense that we're at least staying in touch with the changes that are occurring, and appreciate the way you make these presentations.
Thank you, Senator Kenley. Appreciate that.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chairman Brown.
Thank you. Next is 211 spending. Chatrice Mosley, did I get that right?
Very close, 99%. It's okay, not the first time. Hi, committee. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Chatrice Mosley. Very close. I am the Executive Director of External Affairs for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. The purpose of my testimony today is just to give you an overview of the Commission's plan to administer the budget allocations for Indiana 211 account, and I believe you have the plan that was submitted to our budget agency in your packet. The Commission has been charged by the Indiana legislature with administering the 211 services account, which is funded beginning this year through appropriations from the Indiana General Assembly. As part of its statutory duty, the Commission has developed this plan regarding the administration and the use of the funds in the 211 service account for review by the State Budget Committee. Indiana Code now requires the Commission, after consulting with the Board of Directors of the Indiana 211 Partnership, to submit a Commission plan for the expenditure of the money appropriated to the 211 services account prior to the disbursement of those funds. The plan must include a strategy or plan to address the following service priorities: assistance for parental stress issues, domestic violence, infant mortality, assistance for veterans, services for senior citizens, services for vulnerable children, and public health issues. In addition to this plan, the Commission will submit an annual report to the General Assembly providing specific information relevant to the 211 services account pursuant to Indiana Code 8-1-19.5-12. That annual report, due before November 1st of each year, will include any available statistics, data, and results concerning the expenditure of the money of the 211 services account to address the effectiveness of the 211 services, especially with those service priorities I mentioned earlier. This year's report will include as well a description of each toll-free telephone number operated by a state agency or an instrumental of the state for purposes of providing an information resource for human services and social services as required by the law. On December 1st, 2015, the Commission is also required to follow up with the feasibility study of having 211 service provider take over the operation of the toll-free phone numbers described in the November 1st report pursuant to subsection C. The Commission, after consulting with the 211 Partnership, has identified the following 4 interrelated and mutually reinforcing objectives that address the service priorities mentioned earlier, for which the appropriated funds will be dispersed. $370,000, or 37% of the fund, will be allocated for improving database resources and reporting by the end of the fiscal year. $225,000, or 22% of the fund, will be allocated for increasing the number of calls answered during normal workday hours by the end of fiscal year as well. $295,000, or 29.5% of the fund, will be for retaining after-hours access available 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, 365 days per year through the entirety of the fiscal year. And $110,000, or 11% of the fund, will be for maintaining operational support through the entirety of the fiscal year. To expend the appropriated funds, the Commission and Indiana 211 Partnership will enter into a grant agreement pursuant to statute. The grant agreement will provide the terms for the disbursement of funds. The information is also in your packet. Once a plan is approved, the commission will also establish an administrative rule, which is required by the statute through the state rulemaking process, which will govern the commission's administration of the funds in the 211 account, as well as the reporting from the 211 partnership and perhaps other requirements. The commission is incurring administrative costs for the appropriation of the 211 fund and the rulemaking, as well as providing the General Assembly with a report that must show objectively that the service priorities have been addressed. This year, these administrative costs are being paid with the Commission's current utility budget. While these administrative costs are not being charged to the 211 fund, this year the statute does allow for it. If necessary and pursuant to the direction of the state budget agency, these costs may be paid for through the 211 fund per the statute in the future years. Thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I mean, this is the first year I think we've had this report since it started as a line item in the budget. So
yes,
I'm sure we're digesting it as we go forward. So
yeah,
we
I
have
believe
questions, we'll individually probably have to contact you.
And I would be happy to answer any questions as you guys digest the information and have any questions with regards to the objectives. And I'm sure all of you will receive a copy, I'll ensure that, of the report that's due November. Because the funds have not been dispersed yet, we would not have as much statistical information, data relating to the service priorities other than what's going to happen with the funds since it's just right around the corner in the next few weeks. But we will be addressing the toll-free numbers, which is required this year in the November 1st report, followed a month later with a little bit more on the feasibility study with regards to the 800 numbers.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Next, I shuffled my papers and lost where I'm at. We have Kate England, Department of Transportation, and it's airport funding, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Katie England. I am the Director of Multimodal Planning and Programs with the Indiana Department of Transportation. And I'm here today to request approval to use $2 million of the fiscal 16-17 biennium appropriation from the Airport Development Fund. The General Assembly appropriated $4 million to us over the biennium from the Build Indiana funding, or the BIF fund, to use for the Airport Development Fund. Indiana's state aviation system plan includes 69 airports that serve the air transportation needs of more than 6.5 million Hoosiers. This year, 62 airports have been selected to receive approximately $70 million in federal funding from the Federal Aviation Administration for airport development projects. These projects include a wide range of activities such as pavement reconstruction and rehab of runways and taxiways, approach protection, land acquisition, runway extensions, and planning for future projects. The FAA awards 90% of the total project cost to the municipality or airport sponsoring the project with a 10% match requirement. NDOT provides a 5% match, and the locals are responsible for providing the other 5% match to get us to that 10% match requirement. Indiana's airports provide many economic benefits to the state. A 2012 economic study conducted by Connexus found that for every dollar invested in the airport, the community will realize $10 in benefits. NDOT's participation helps reduce the local entity's match requirement and helps them leverage all of the federal funding that they can get to maintain and enhance their infrastructure. Thank you for your consideration and support of Indiana's airports. Are there any questions?
Questions? Senator Broden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are these funding typically very competitive? In other words, are there a lot of requests that go unfunded, or is there times where the locals can't come up with the match such that money goes unused from the federal government on the 90% match?
We try to do whatever we can to prevent any of the airports from having to return federal funding. I'm not sure if there's been examples in recent history of that happening. I'd actually defer to my aviation manager's here. He says no, that has not happened. So that's basically why we try to keep our match percentage right around 5% so that we can be a good partner with our locals so that they don't have to return any of those federal funds.
Further questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we're on item 6, retiree medical benefit accounts. Deanna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should all have this handout in your packet or on by your chair, your table there. We each year provide just an annual update of the financial status of the retirement medical benefits account, also known as the 501 program, and everyone should be familiar with this program, but just a quick overview. It's the program that if you are eligible for retirement with the state and you work until you're retired, then you receive an account that you can use to reimburse or pay reimbursements on medical premiums. If you work for the state and you leave before you retire, then you're not eligible to receive the account balance upon termination of employment with the state. So that's the program that we're talking about. Just want to give a quick highlight a few of the statistics from the 2015 fiscal year. We did add an additional 1,059 retirees over the past fiscal year. That number is a little lower than it was for fiscal 14, but still higher than it had been prior to fiscal 14. So prior to fiscal 14, we were looking at around 700, 750 retirees. So we're still higher than we have been for the past couple of years. The average retiree account balance is a little over almost $22,000, and the average active account balance is about $6,300. I will say that I think the most important thing that members are usually interested in the funded status. The plan is 105% funded, and that is projected to continue for the next few years. The appropriations and contributions received for fiscal 15 were $43.3 million, and the fund had a legal balance of $270.6 million at the end of fiscal 15. Just wanted to make a quick mention of legislation that passed and how that impacts the status of the fund. As you all know, there was legislation that essentially froze the account balance of retirees that will freeze their account balance on June 30th, 2017. What would have happened if that hadn't passed? A couple of things. There probably would have been a large number of people that would have retired, but also it would have made the state contributions in that year much higher than they would be. And then, there would be like a cliff and then a heavy drop off after 2017 because we would no longer have that bonus contribution. Instead, what happens is it's more of a gradual decline of the state's contribution to support the program. So instead of dropping off really quickly at the end of 2017, it drops off more gradually. So that was basically the impact of the legislation that passed. The actuaries are still reporting that the plan will still be relatively at the same funding level, provided obviously that the state continues to provide and support the contribution. So are there any questions?
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the completeness of that. We did item number 7. Item 8. Do we do 8 and 9 together? IEDC?
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Chris Cotterill, General Counsel of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. Today I'm joined by Chris Lamoth, who is the CEO of Elevate Ventures. And you may recall 2 meetings of yours ago, Steve Akert, our Chief of Staff, mentioned that Chris was joining, and with a lot of fanfare that was had by the press and others to celebrate that. Chris has been on board now for 60 to maybe even 90 days now. We have a handout which we hope you'll find helpful. There really are 2 items that I would like to speak most directly to.
although you may want to hear from Chris on those issues as well. And then he has the following one relating to the Purdue Foundry. If it's appropriate, I'd like to just use this PowerPoint purely as organizational and don't intend to read to anyone. But it is useful because it is essentially the highlights of an investment policy that was recently adopted by the IEDC Board of Directors. And it was done so, that investment policy is the policy for the 21 fund, which the General Assembly makes appropriations to. And it's the investment policy which guides what types of transactions that the IDC and its partner, contractor Elevate considers. What falls in the policy can be invested in, and what falls out obviously cannot. The reason that we're here talking about an investment policy is because state law changed effective July 1 that said that we can move a little faster with our process. Historically, it's been that these deals, if they're SBIR, STTR, or Elevate, more directly Elevate-related transactions, would wait. They would wait for review by this committee, and then we would execute a contract that would be subject to the budget agency's approval. The thinking apparently has been that that's a step that we now will no longer take, but we'll come back and report on our activities consistent with the investment policy. So the heart of this is this a good investment policy? The IDC Board of Directors thinks it is because it has a number of limitations and guidance. And I'll start with, on page 3 of this handout to you, the ethics, which is found on the last page of the policy. But we thought for presentation purposes, let's start with the kind of conflicts of interest procedures that we have in place. What you'll find in the policy is all of the things you would expect to avoid self-dealing, to require disclosure, to require recusal. And those are part and parcel of the investment policy, not something separate. They are also in addition to the standard operating procedures at the IDC and those that come with being subject to all of the state ethics rules of state employees and state contractors. So the policy is grounded foundationally on clear ethics requirements. A second major point is when the state of Indiana makes investments, it makes investments appropriately in companies with an Indiana link. And on the 4th page of this presentation, you'll see just a very high-level look at the kind of requirements we have to make sure that we are investing in substantially clear, high-growth potential companies, usually technology-related, but not always, companies that would diversify our business base, or companies that we think that meet those criteria, but also would generate more money. This is a very unique investment. All of you know about fund where the state of Indiana has essentially found a very creative and smart way to invest in companies that can grow and create more money to invest in other companies. When it works, it's very, very exciting. But again, I would just say in the investment policy, you will find we invest in the right kinds of Indiana companies. Well, I'll get to what does that mean, the right kind and what's the wrong kind. But there are parameters. We, the IDC with Elevate, cannot invest in any company, and there are limits to that. There is a $4 million threshold before the IDC Board of Directors would have to make a special approval with Elevate. There are special procedures around what happens when Elevate itself takes a lead investor role, as opposed to coming alongside a group of private investors. So there's a series of requirements around that. And there's a series of requirements around the kinds of ways that Elevate primarily, but then the IDC team will review an investment. Does the company have the right team? Has it identified a market that has expansive and clear growth? Is the product it's offering likely to be bought and bought repeatedly? Does it have a clear customer base, and will it receive a return on investment? These are things we didn't invent, obviously. These are things that make sense when you're investing money, and the policy reflects a best practices approach to that. So when you get through a 5-page, 6-page investment policy, you sort of say, well, what can't they invest in? And there's a fair amount in the policy that says what cannot be invested in. We can't invest in something to refinance debt. We can't invest in something purely to affect a change of business ownership. We can't
invest in something simply to repay delinquent taxes. We can't invest in something to pay employee stock options. And then there's a whole series of ineligible recipients, primarily firms involved in speculative activities that develop profits from fluctuation in price, people who are playing market speculation, banks, insurance companies, certain nonprofit institutions, people involved in pyramid sales, gambling activities, charitable activities, religious activities. This is state government operating in a very defined way with a series of levels of approval and ethical safeguards, trying to invest in businesses that create jobs in Indiana and wealth creation in Indiana. There are a lot of other programs that could go do other things, and this is not that. This is not those. It's within the context of that investment policy that we will move forward with transactions that would have otherwise come here. They will then go straight to the budget agency, who will say, is this agreement that they're proposing within the available funds? Is it consistent with the law as they understand it? Is it consistent with the investment policy reviewed by this committee? We won't change the investment policy without coming back. We can't. When I say we, I mean the IDC Board of Directors. But we will execute deals faster. I mean, frankly, we think more in a market-based tempo, and Chris can speak to that better than I can, given his experience. And transactions like those that you've heard from Steve Bakerd and from me once before around the Small Business Innovative Research Program, SBIR, and Small Business Technology Transfer Program, STTR, we can move forward with leveraging state funds, which to date we've leveraged $1.9 million in state funds to have companies that have been identified who've then received $6.9 million in federal funds. Funds that if we don't leverage, go to some other state. There's a list of those companies. They are subject to the federal requirements. They're based on their innovation and their application. Very similar, frankly, to the Purdue Foundry approach. I'm perhaps moving too quickly, although this could get pretty dry almost instantly. I apologize for that. On page 12, with the chairman's permission, we could move and then take questions together at the end if you like, to some comments from Mr. Lamoth about the Purdue, where we are with the Foundry Fund and some of the transactions under that. And at that point, our presentation would be finished.
Yes, let's go ahead and proceed with Chris. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm delighted to be here speaking with you as the relatively new CEO of Elevate Ventures. I'm actually excited to be part of Elevate Ventures going forward. Back when I was at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, and many of us worked together on the creating the 21 Fund and the concept behind the 21 Fund. I believe it's more critical today than it's ever been that Indiana has a very dynamic and aggressive entrepreneurial culture building and investment strategy as a state. So I'm very pleased to be part of this. One of the programs that we administer and that we work with is the Elevate Purdue Foundry Fund. And essentially what that is it's really, from my perspective, it's kind of an experiment to take a look at whether through this Elevate Purdue Foundry Fund we can really begin to light the fire behind the movement of intellectual property to commercialization. And we have, I think, in Indiana, we're blessed, I believe, as one of the top states in the country with a public-private university system that has the potential to be remarkable and prolific in the development of commercial enterprises from intellectual property. So this was approved by the IDC board in July 2013. As is indicated here, there's about $2 million that are part of the program over a 3-year period. It's kind of broken down into two kinds of awards: a black award, which is up to $20,000, and then a gold award, which obviously are a little more rare than the black awards, and those are $80,000. So a company could potentially have up to $100,000 in support for IP to commercialization strategy. It's set up where the decision-making on behind the investments and the selections of those companies is a joint responsibility between the Elevate Ventures team and the Purdue Foundry team. And we had first presentations to the State Board of State Budget Committee in December of last year. You also have in front of you kind of a list of some firms that kind of for your review that are in the process right now of getting approval that lays out and gives you an idea, at least some of the firms that we're taking a look at. I would just comment that there's a lot of universities are taking a look at this Purdue Foundry Fund. I've begun to have conversations with a number of universities around the state that are very interested in looking at something like this and trying to figure out how to move this IP to commercialization. So I think it's really having its intended impact. We could, if we move aggressively, and I can assure you we will, we could have a number of these programs around the state working with both public and private universities that have the capacity to begin to galvanize not only students but also their the academy itself in looking at opportunities. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Chris, I don't know if you might want to come up as well, and we can handle any questions you'd like to throw at us.
Senator Kenley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, it's good to have you on board. I really am pleased and excited about the prospect of having you be part of our team on this economic development effort, and I know you'll give it 100%. This is a pretty big step for the Budget Committee to relinquish oversight and supervision on some of these detailed projects. And probably the area where that falls into place most commonly where you can slip and kind of have some problems is the integrity of the process and the fact that it doesn't just become a system that rewards the friends of whoever the people who hand out the money are. And I think that these two documents that you all have prepared, if you can be faithful to those in your implementation as the Chief Executive Officer, and if you can, and I would ask almost that it's important that you have an outstanding board. You have the kind of people on there that we know the integrity is there and we know that these are the principles they have. But I would urge that you all, as you have your meetings, to have these documents present at the meetings and remind the board members for the first ever so often that, hey, these are our guiding principles. Any questions or comments you have where you think we're steering away from these, you should bring these up, because the purpose of a board of directors is to run the business and have input. It's not just to rubber stamp something that somebody's doing. So and you're used to all that, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I think it's important that I say it publicly, that this is what we would like for you to do in terms of how you implement this. And these are good documents, so.
I couldn't agree more, Senator Kenley. This is a process that we really spent quite a bit of time discussing, both within Elevate and also at IDC. And there is a very, as you said, there's some incredibly bright people that are sit on all of those boards and have a fiduciary responsibility to making sure that we execute well. And it's my responsibility as the CEO to make sure that each one of those is carried out faithfully, and I will do that.
I know you'll do that. Thank you.
Representative Clinker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say, Chris, that we're keeping a lot of our students at Purdue in PhDs and postdocs because of the capability or maybe the probability of receiving one of these funds. So we appreciate that. Even though it's not a lot of money, it's enough to keep them working and doing the research that they need to do. So we appreciate this fund very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Clinker.
Further questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I guess that takes of 8, 9, and 10, right? We're now ready for Mr. Shields, regional cities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Eric Shields with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. I've got some packets here. So in your packets on the right-hand side, you have the slide deck that I'll be walking through today. On the left side, there's a recent article from Dr. Mike Hicks at Ball State on the Regional Cities Initiative. And in back of that is the program that we used last week when each of the regions presented their plans. So today we're thankful to be here with you to provide you an update on the Regional Cities Initiative. Thank you for your support during the legislative session as we pitched this concept and as we move forward to prove it out. I'll walk you through the slide deck in the right-hand side of your packet. Briefly, an overview of the initiative, just a reminder for everyone in the room what this is about, followed by the timeline and process that we're going through, and then briefly walk through each one of the plans at a very high level. So in your deck, slide 2, just a reminder, what is this initiative about? Ultimately, by concentrating on creating vibrant communities around our state, this initiative seeks to transform our state into a destination for talent. The work of the General Assembly and our elected officials over the last decade has positioned Indiana in such a way that we're nationally and globally known as a destination for businesses. And we need to take that to the next level and really become a destination for talent. And the IADC and the state hopes to serve really as a catalyst for that. The regions have to do the work in order to get there. But we want to help empower them, empower that local leadership to really cast a vision for what they want to become. And so how will we use the $84 million that was appropriated this past session? We will be a financial partner with 2 regions here in this first round to prove this concept out. So on the next slide, you've got a timeline of events over the last really year and a half, almost 2 years. On the left side, most of that you're generally familiar with probably already. On the right-hand side, it lays out some of the key events that have occurred since the legislative session ended. Starting at the top where our board of directors formed a strategic review committee, which is responsible for reviewing these plans and ultimately making a recommendation to our board for the 2 regions that we should partner with. At the end of August, each of the 7 regions submitted their plans on time. And I want to point out our commitment to transparency during this process. Within 24 hours of receiving those plans, we posted them online, which coincided with the press release. And we sent those to each of the members here as well. And then the presentations last Tuesday and Wednesday at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, we live streamed those. Those are also available online where you find the plans. So if you wanted to go back and watch one of the presentations, they're about an hour and a half long. You can do that at your leisure. The next steps in the process will be for the review committee to come together and discuss what they've seen, read, and heard from these regions and begin to kind of distill this down and work towards making recommendations. That will occur in December at our board meeting. December 15th is the date of that next meeting. So the next slide outlines for you which regions we're talking about here, and they're shaded on the map so that you can see them. 7 regions, and so consider this: 6 months ago, we had 1 regional development authority in this state. Now we have 7. They represent together roughly 1/3 of all the counties in our state and about 70% of the population. And in aggregate, the plans that they submitted include about 420 projects, along with nearly $3.8 billion of total investment. On the next slide, it lays out for you the evaluation criteria that the review committee has agreed to use. And those are just the simple bullet points of the evaluation criteria. It's really a 2-page document, and that's on the website as well. They discussed that in their meeting in September, and it's posted online. Again, the review committee was formed by our board, and the criteria itself is based on both the statutory criteria that we were working with, as well as the principles from the Peer Cities report that we published a year ago, last October. So the next several slides are overviews of each one of the plans that were submitted. Before I walk through those, I just want to say that the slides here don't do them justice. They're hundreds of pages long, and there's a lot to them. So, you know, each of these regions have invested volumes of man hours. They've raised private funds to put these plans together, and they've worked incredibly hard. And really, it's been stunning to watch. Each one of them could probably write a book about what they've had to go through over the last several months. So, with that, I'll go through each one of the plans, and I'll just point out that the order that they're in is the order that they presented in last week, which was chosen randomly. The North Central region really focuses on 4 key areas: amenities, density, productivity, and connectivity. The map there lays out their 5 marquee projects, as they refer to them, that are in their plan. Again, up the top, the total aggregate value of the plan is a little over $700 million. And I'll just highlight one of the marquee projects. The Innovation District there in South Bend includes the former Studebaker building, I think number 84, which is still standing. And when we were on our site visit there, they actually took us on a tour of it, which I didn't know you could do. But they have plans to, instead of tear that down, revitalize that over the course of several phases over the next few years. And what's also not on here is the partnership that the community in the region has entered into with the University of Notre Dame, which is the face of this region. It's the brand of this region. They're going to do whatever they can to leverage that. On the next slide, the Northwest region, they're focusing on the proximity that they have to Chicago. That RDA's been in here countless times talking about the things that they work on. The plan that they submitted to us focuses entirely on double tracking the south shoreline between Chicago and ultimately it ends in South Bend. And that would allow them to reduce the travel time between those 2 cities from about 2.5 hours to 90 minutes, putting South Bend essentially at making it a suburb of Chicago. The Northeast region on the next page is created an 11-county partnership. It's the largest one that was created in the state. And the name of their plan there at the top, as you can see, certainly embraces the objective of this initiative as they seek to build their region from roughly 700,000 in population up to 1 million over the next several years. I think their goal is to hit that by 2031 if they're able to execute their plan. 38 projects and $400 million in total investment in the first 2 years. And on the right-hand side there, you'll see kind of the 5 themes that their projects fall under. One of the anchor projects in downtown Fort Wayne at the bottom, they refer to them as marquee projects as well, is the riverfront development. When you're in Fort Wayne today downtown, you don't see the river or experience the river unless you're on a bridge. And so they are seeking to capitalize on the fact that they do have 3 rivers that run through their city and make it accessible to the public. The West Central region on the next slide
encompasses Vigo, Sullivan, and Knox County. Those counties came together and formed a partnership in a pretty short period of time this summer, and largely focuses on redevelopment of existing assets and facilities, as well as capitalizing on the significant higher education assets that they have in their region. And on the right-hand side there, you'll see the Icon building, which, when completed, they will be a mixed-use facility that includes a Launch Terre Haute, which is based on the Launch Fishers model. On the next slide, you have the central region, which submitted a plan that's based on its SEDS plan, which is a U.S. EDA program that they've gone through, and it focuses really on connecting the region to downtown Indianapolis through a variety of means. The one project I'll highlight here is 16 Tech, which is just a little northwest of downtown Indianapolis, up where Indiana Avenue intersects with 16th Street. And their plan calls for that to become, over the next several years, an innovation hub, and that supports research, entrepreneurs, as well as workforce development. The East Central region, on the next slide, is the region that includes Muncie, Anderson, Newcastle, as well as some other smaller communities. They've built their plan around 3 themes that you'll see there at the side, at the left side of the page. In downtown Muncie, in that orange box there on the left of it, you'll see just one project that they're planning, which is to convert the old Centus facility into what they call a maker's space to support the entrepreneurs in their community. Finally, the last plan that was submitted is Southwest Indiana, Evansville. This is a plan that centers around really leveraging their health expertise, and they break their projects down into gateway projects, city center projects, and supportive projects. And so those are the plans that were submitted. Again, I'd encourage you to read them and watch the presentations. Again, all of it's available on the website. In closing, we're seeing tremendous momentum being built right now. We couldn't have done it without your support during the legislative session. We're seeing a renewed pride in communities across the state, and we're excited about moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Klinker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know what greenways are. We've been discussing this. What do you consider blueways?
So those are the riverfront developments. Yep.
Senator Talion.
When will you have an update on how much money comes in through this amnesty program?
The tax amnesty program, as I understand it, the window closes on November 16th, and so we expect that we'll have a good handle on exactly how much money there is at that point.
Okay, nothing in the interim? You don't have any projections?
Director Bailey.
Sure. From data the Department of Revenue provided on October 1st, they have $21 million both in cash received and in taxpayers who plan to go through the amnesty program. They are ahead of their milestone. That was a milestone for early November. And they expect that the vast bulk of the proceeds are going to come in near the last couple of weeks of the program, which is what happened historically in 2005.
And I don't want to put any dampen this initiative, but 420 projects, $3.78 billion. I mean, that's the wish list of these communities and regions that they've come up with. You know, we're putting in only $84 million of state dollars. That's a small drop to $3.78 billion. Is there anything innovative as far as local funding, or is it still kind of the same property tax base, TIF districts, those sorts of things? How long-term are people going to think about capital at $3.78 billion?
I think that they are planning to use the traditional tools that are available to them. Some of them are looking at other creative ways to fund these over time. And my understanding is that having an RDA allows a region to, with the support of the fiscal bodies, to enact an additional set it 0.1 or 0.5%. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but they're looking. Some of them are looking at that option, but that requires a lot of gathering a lot of support across a region, and that's one of the things that we think that has there to create the RDA structure under this process. There was no financial obligation that was needed up front, and so this allows them to come together around the vision and the projects that they think are needed to get them there, and then figure out how to fund them as they move forward. But the state funds will only match the funds that the local public bodies put on the table. Having said that, these are primarily private sector driven projects. So although there are some infrastructure elements and things like that, the vast majority of these projects are driven by the private sector.
Senator Kinley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, Eric, you're going through this process and you're pretty enthused, and it is a good sign that people are thinking about how they can better their regional area and have these kind of plans. And even though the numbers are so huge that they seem somewhat improbable in terms of receiving grants and all that kind of stuff at those levels, another thing that the IEDC could do with this and begin to work back with, now you have these 7 authorities, is to say, why don't you take the assets you have and the budget you have and have your people analyze them, because maybe you need to reprioritize how you spend your current dollars. What happens in the beginning is when we want a new building or something that we belong to a not-for-profit, you just talk about the one new thing you're going to have without ever considering that maybe present dollars need to be reevaluated. And that's just part of the process of always moving forward, whether it's a business or a community or anything else. And that's another resource of dollars that sometimes it seems a little tougher to go get those dollars, but actually you're putting them to a higher use when you rethink, other the dollars we're spending over here today, is that really giving us a bang for the buck? Or maybe this new idea that this regional authority came out is really a much more promising concept. And maybe the IEDC can help them to have discussions along those lines, and maybe that's a source of money.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Yeah. Senator Broom.
Thank you. Eric, could you just comment on the selection process? Is the Strategic Review Committee members, are they sort of like the College Football Playoff Committee? Are they going to ultimately pick the two, or are these is this the group?
Yeah, that's the group. It's chaired by one of our board members, John Thompson, and their job is to evaluate these plans based on the criteria that they established, and make the recommendations to our board. Our board's been engaged along the way. Particularly, John Mutz and Bob Cook have been to several of the review committee meetings. They've offered perspectives of their own for consideration. They attended the presentations. So our board is completely engaged and aligned with where the review committee is going.
Okay. But not to be an advanced conspirationalist or whatever you would call it, but first of all, the resumes of these board members are very impressive, but I also notice it's somewhat Indy-centric, just from looking at them. And I just hope that they, I'm glad they're getting out and looking at all of these, but hope they can, kind of check that at the door as well and look
Sure.
at the projects on their merits.
We have confidence that they can do that, otherwise we wouldn't have put them in that position.
Further questions? Great comments. Further questions or comments? Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. We've gone through the projects and review items. Are there any motions to remove any items from the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries. You have the reports that are listed and have been received on the dates identified there, so they're for your information and review. My understanding is December 17th, we'll be having next Budget Committee meeting in Indianapolis because we'll have both the revenue forecast update and Medicaid update at the same time, as well as probably projects to go through. So it'll be December 17th in Indianapolis. Any further closing comments, members of the committee or staff?
Good meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for all the hard work. I thought we were going to be here a little longer, especially after the first two items took about 40 minutes, but appreciate all the diligent work and attention that you do and commitment that you have to this process. We are adjourned.